Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 285 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I hope you had a chance to listen to the three of us celebrating the victory over Virginia. We're going to give you even more analysis of that Virginia game. This will be the sober analysis. This is us operating off of 5, maybe 6 hours of sleep, but at least a little bit of rest to talk about that Virginia game. We're also going to be previewing a huge week ahead for the Blue Devils, starting with a game against the Syracuse Orangemen that is, nothing but important games from here on out. And this is a very important one. But yeah, actually, that's right. Syracuse is just the Orange. They're not the Orangemen. I don't remember what they're called. What the heck? In any event, let me bring in my guys, Donald Wine and Samuel Klein. Donald just texted me to say Syracuse is the Orange, not the Orangemen. Thank you, Donald.
Oh, no problem. It's old habits die hard. I know growing up, Eastern Michigan, where I'm from, were the Hurons. They have not been the Hurons for like 30 years. No, I'm sorry. I'm almost 40. So almost 40 years. And they, people there still call them the Hurons. So it's completely understand.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, old school Jason Evans here doesn't remember when things change. And I'm also, as always, joined by Sam Klein. How you doing, Sam? How much sleep did you get?
Not a ton. But I'm young enough to not really remember Syracuse being the Orange Men. So there's more Duke basketball that you guys remember than I do, but I'm not sullied by all these old timey names. So yeah, Syracuse Orange, the only name I know.
So guys, let's get to the discussion of the game that happened just yesterday, which was Duke beating Virginia 66-65. And unlike last night when there were lots of expletives and lots of just us having a good time, we're going to get to a little more sober analysis here. Let's start, as we always do, with our headlines. Sam, I'll let you go first. What's your headline from the game?
So my headline from last night is "Life support is the cure for Duke." We talked about how this was Duke's probably last good opportunity to beat a team that would dramatically improve its chances of making the NCAA tournament. And that, as I think we talked about last night in all of our excitement, the team by and large showed up for that. So life support is the cure for Duke.
I like it. Donald, what's your headline?
My headline is Duke's got something to say in big time victory over UVA. Very simply, Duke made a big statement last night that all ideas about them just withering out and not making this NCAA tournament without a fight, those aspirations are gone now. Duke had something to say last night, and it was, we are here and we're going to fight for this.
So my headline, gentlemen, plays off of what I think was the key moment in the game. And I think you're going to know what my headline's going to be. Duke slaps Virginia, eyes a ticket to the dance. And by slap, I mean the floor slap that happened with 2.5 minutes left. You saw it on television. It's something we don't see from the Blue Devils very often these days. We talked at the beginning, Orange Men, hearkening back to old school stuff regarding college basketball. Duke teams that slap the floor and say, you shall not score from here on out. And that is exactly what happened in this game. And that's what won the Blue Devils this game. So guys, let's we'll do the good first. We'll save the bad. I don't think there's a lot of bad. But let's start with the good. And Donald, I'll go to you first. Give me just one thing. We'll come back and forth on these things, but get me started on what you saw that you really loved last night.
So I'll start with this. They took what UVA gave them. And what I mean by that is last night when we were celebrating this, Jason, you remarked that when you look at the box score and you look at the game and you look at the final score, it may have been a UVA type of game. You may say, oh man, UVA just kind of took Duke down to the level. But Duke's game throughout the course of the Coach K era has been to take the opponent's best shot and always answer the bell. We haven't seen that this year. For the first time last night, we did just that. We had a great team in Cameron, one of the best teams in the country. We took their best shot, and our guys kept answering the bell. As you mentioned, that floor slap, they did not let UVA score the rest of the way after that. And I'm so proud of this team because we've talked about the inconsistency on offense and defense and special teams and intangibles, every other category that you could possibly throw in there. But last night, even if things weren't going bad or weren't going well, they answered the bell. Every time the UVA threw a shot, we threw one back. Every time UVA got a defensive stop, we did the same thing. Every single time UVA gave us something that they thought was going to be the knockout blow, we would answer with one of our own. And I think that is what Duke games used to be about back in the day, where, you know, we would slug it out with teams and eventually win. This was a team where the better team came into Cameron and they lost to a team who was better on the night because they kept getting up, they kept fighting, and they kept answering the bell.
Yeah, I'll tell you that you hit on something I wanted to talk about, which is the guts that this team showed. This was a game where you had to gut it out with hard work at both ends of the floor. When Virginia went up 5 with about 6 minutes left, I'll be honest, I thought we were going to lose that ball game, but we found a way to gut it out. And I want to get back to the slap for a second, the floor slap. So I want everyone to remember what happened leading up to that. From about the 6-minute mark to about the 2.5-minute mark, both teams scored on 9 consecutive possessions. We were quite literally trading baskets, and it wasn't even just trading baskets. It was like trading 3 for trading 3, trading 2 for trading 2. You know, it was like the same thing at either end of the floor. You know, Hauser would hit a big bucket, Hurt would hit a big bucket. You know, Stewart would hit a 3, and then, you know, someone on Virginia would hit a 3. It was you know, the classic back and forth. And then that floor slap happened, and Virginia did not score again. They didn't get a single point in the final 2.5 minutes. Neither team scored at all in the final 2 minutes. It was all the guts, I think, that Duke had to show to win this game. I found that incredibly impressive. We're a team that has struggled in close games this year. I'm trying to think, you know, I think like BC, maybe, you know, we've had some close wins, but, you know, we haven't had a game like this. The games like this, we have mostly lost. And it was a big turning point for this young team to get a win where it could go either way. Sam, what
I think
you got?
you're going to hear a lot about how exactly what you were talking about, Jason. This is one of the first games this season where it's a close game that Duke is able to gut out and figure out how to be on top after 40 minutes. A lot of Duke's losses this year have been by 1 possession, 2 possessions. Duke hasn't gotten blown out a lot. And to the extent that they've lost sort of convincingly, it's been to very good teams, which is why, despite looking at a record that is basically even for the season, there is still hope for Duke to make it into the NCAA tournament because their advanced metrics have been lingering a little bit higher than expected. I think we're also going to get to the fact that Duke didn't move much in KenPom last night, despite winning this game, because KenPom had this as a 1-point Duke loss, and it turned out to be a 2-point Duke victor or 1-point Duke victory. So there's actually not that much deviation from the expectations. The difference is that Duke actually won this game, where they haven't been able to do so in previous weeks against other really good opponents. And so that it feels like a huge turnaround to us, even though the team, it feels like, has been building to this point for a couple of weeks.
You know, just really quickly, I want to talk about a little bit about shooting in this game. Duke only hit 18% of their threes in the second half. We only hit 1 of 5 free throws. So we had to get this done in the half court against Virginia's pack line defense, which that's like the hardest thing to do in all of college basketball. And by the way, speaking of shooting, for the first time this year, Duke beat a team that shot well from 3. Virginia hit 45% of their 3-pointers, and Duke still won. We haven't done that all year long. But the way we did it was we didn't let Virginia dictate what kind of game it would be. You know, it was a slow game, but Wendell Moore talked about in the pregame how important it would be to get some fast break points and to not play against their set defense. And we managed to get 14 points off fast break. Donald, I know you wanted to talk more about that. That's a big number against Virginia, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, like you said, this is where the stats don't necessarily tell the story of the game. That just from, if you looked at just stats, you just look just the box score, you would say, man, they really grinded it out. But they took advantage of those opportunities, the fast break points. And honestly, we got a lot of spark from our bench. We outscored them. Our bench points outscored them 19-7. And we had a lot of spark off the bench. We had a lot of spark and when we had opportunities to get fast break points, we were able to get them. UVA, of course, you know, scoring 2 points was really, you know, for them is whatever, because they don't like to go out on fast breaks. But for us, being able to get out and get our points quickly and get back on defense is something that needed to happen, because that is where UVA likes to. And there's times where UVA were able to stop fast breaks, but they were able to, for us, we were able to get out, get our points, and those points ended up being a big difference, a big impact on the game.
Sam, give me some of the players. I mean, we got to talk Jamin Brakefield and Matthew Hurt, right?
Absolutely. Jamin Brakefield, we've said, is the guy Jamin Brakefield, we've said, is the guy who gets the most opportunity from Jalen Johnson not being on this team anymore. And he showed up all over the place last night. I think he was effective in limited time against Wake Forest and has now become a pretty important part of this rotation, be it shooting open baskets when he's away from the basket. You know, he's allowed to take 3-pointers and mid-range shots, which I don't think we expect a lot of freshmen to be able to do. He's gotten a few key layups. Last night, he got that layup in transition that was actually fairly acrobatic. And then he had another one that was a baseline layup that was pretty advanced for a freshman who hasn't gotten a lot of playing time this year. So
it was the game winning points there you're
right.
talking about, Sam.
and so Jamin Brakefield has made this huge contribution on offense, especially as a scorer. On defense, he's become maybe the best defender on the team. If we're not talking about Jordan Goldwire's performance yesterday, Brakefield is blocking shots and is altering offense for opponents. And by the way, doing it against guys who are much bigger than him. Brakefield is not, he's shaped like a pretty average size wing. He's not a big man in terms of his size and shape, but he's able to play in the post in limited minutes and really contribute in that way.
Well, wait. Let's not get crazy. Jamin Brakefield's not the second best defender on this team to Jordan Goldwire. That is still Wendell Moore, in my opinion. But Brakefield, Coach K talked about this in the post-game news conference. He said that Jamin Brakefield has the kind of footwork that allowed him to play against someone who's a really advanced post player like Jay Huff. And boy, Jay Huff, you got to tip your hat to what a great player that guy is.
Nope. I don't have to. He was supposed to retire 2 years ago. I stand by my statement. No, in all seriousness, he had a great game for a man who came out of retirement to play against Duke and Cameron.
We told you that Jay Huff and Sam Hauser were going to have good games, and they had good games, and Duke is winning in spite of them. I think we can keep talking about the defense in that regard, right, Jason?
Yes. In fact, I wanted to mention, so Duke, one of the advantages, I think, of having Brakefield in the game versus Mark Williams was Duke was switching everything. And the strange thing to me was, we're talking about Jay Huff, Duke would switch guards onto Jay Huff, and Virginia just didn't want to give Huff the ball in those situations. It was very strange. I think when it was Goldwire, it was mostly being Goldwire switched onto him. When Goldwire was switched onto him, I think Virginia was a little bit afraid of Jordan Goldwire and his craftiness on defense. And they thought, if we give the ball to Huff in here, Goldwire is going to get another steal, because that guy gets steals on everybody. But they didn't even do it. They didn't even give it to Huff when Jeremy Roach would get switched onto him. And the other thing, you were mentioning about Hauser, who had an outstanding game. And in the first half, Matthew Hurt and Sam Hauser were playing, I score, now you score, just back and forth. But in the second half, Virginia almost forgot about Hauser a little bit. And I think they made a big mistake going to Kihei Clark and Huff almost exclusively down the stretch. I think they would have been wise to take more advantage of Hauser. His usage rate in this game was only 20%. Clark and Huff were up around 30%, and Hauser was the more effective player. Hauser only got one shot in the final 4 minutes of this game, and that may be one of the reasons that Duke won the game. But part of that is Duke's defense, and especially I thought Matthew Hurt, who's not a guy known for his defense, did a really nice job when he was matched up with Hauser.
And Hauser, I think for the first 28 minutes of the game, didn't miss a shot. He was on in the first half. He hit, I think he had 12 points at the half, but he was very, very effective when he had the ball. And I think part of the game plan about switching everything around led them to kind of focus in on other guys. Not necessarily that Sam Hauser was the one they wanted, that they knew could beat him, because there are several guys on the court that could, but they were able to take what UVA gave them and say, okay, if this guy's making all the shots, let's funnel the ball away from him and make other guys make shots. And Kihei Clark made a couple of them, but they're down the stretch. He missed a couple of threes. He missed a layup, and then he got blocked by Brakefield at the end. So those things were, we put our guys in the position where we gave UVA gave us something, and we let them kind of take it up to a point, and then we snatched it back from them.
I think I said this last night, but one of the things that was so exciting about this game was the way Duke was playing its sort of old school, opportunistic, passing lane, swarming defense that we as old Duke fans love to reminisce about. And Jordan Goldwire, I think, was the perfect epitome of the way that we were playing last night, reaching for steals and getting around guys, making them feel uncomfortable. He did that to Kihei Clark. He did that to other guards and guys on the perimeter for UVA. And Jason, you talked about how UVA couldn't find Sam Hauser down the stretch to make key buckets for them. I think part of that was that the Duke swarming defense spooked UVA into playing even more conservatively on offense than they normally would. And Duke just frustrated them in a way that it was like, yes, they were relying on, they had Jay Huff down the stretch, who is a great scorer, but they also had Kihei Clark handling the ball. And by the way, I told you in the preview that Kihei Clark can occasionally cough the ball up. 3 turnovers yesterday, all of those sort of perimeter turnovers that led to fast breaks from Duke. So that little bit of difference from Duke, that little extra aggression led by Goldwire, I think was the difference in this game.
So I want to mention a couple other guys. And I agree. Breakfield, Goldwire, these guys had fabulous games, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I want to talk really quickly about a few other guys who maybe don't jump out of the box score in the same way. One of them is Henry Coleman. He continues to show awareness and energy and bring positives to this team every minute he's in the game. He doesn't play a lot, and I'm not saying he needs to be playing 15, 20 minutes a game because he's still limited in some of the things he can contribute to this Duke team. But the 5 minutes that he plays, he makes sure that he's important. I got an amazing stat for you guys. Duke only had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. This is something that I was going to touch about in the bad, but I'm going to get to it here because it relates to Henry Coleman and it is something very good. Duke only had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. 2 of those offensive rebounds were what are known as team rebounds, where the ball was batted around a little bit and it went out of bounds and Duke got it after going out of bounds on a rebound. And those are team rebounds. So no one on Duke grabbed that rebound. Duke's other 2 offensive rebounds were both balls that found their way into the hands of Henry Coleman. That dude is just opportunistic and always active. And he turned both of those offensive rebounds into baskets for him. In a 1-point game, huge, just huge to have a guy come off the bench and do that for you. I just love the kid. He's just given his all the whole time.
There was several times last night where, when he was in the game, and he wasn't in the game that long, but there were several times during those moments when he was in the game where I was like, yeah, Henry, because he was doing something to make an impact. And I noted there was one where he kind of grabbed the rebound. It was a little bit further out into the paint, and then he kind of just launched himself towards the rim and laid it in. And I was like, that is a power move that, that is a symbol of confidence. That is a man who has gained confidence from last summer when we thought he had all the confidence in the world till now. Like, that is an incredible leap of ability that we've seen him grow over the last few months.
Yeah. And so another guy who did not have a big box score game, at least in terms of scoring, that I want to talk about is Wendell Moore. I think he's turned into the leader of this team. He had 7 assists in this game, 5 rebounds, only 1 turnover. He was initiating the offense as much as anyone on this team. And Duke had 16 assists on 26 made baskets. That's a 61% assist rate. That's huge. And you've got to do that kind of thing against Virginia. You cannot score one man going against the Virginia defense. There are just too many of them, and they help too much. You have to move the ball around. And Wendell Moore was the guy who moved the ball around more than anyone else. And then the last guy I want to talk about, we got to come up. There's got to be a good nickname for Matthew Hurt. He's like butter. The dude is just so smooth. It's incredible.
You mean you don't prefer the unfair comparisons to Larry Bird that Jay Billis was throwing out?
Yeah, Larry Bird, Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, look, I actually think...
Look, just because you're white and you could shoot doesn't mean you're Larry Bird.
Yes, and Matthew Hurt is not nearly the passer and creative scorer that Larry Bird was. That's absurd. But, his fadeaway, that fadeaway is such a weapon. And I still go back to Dirk Nowitzki. I think that's the guy whose game it really resembles. And it's not because of his skin color.
The other guy I like, actually, as a Matthew Hurt comparison, is he's got a little bit of Tim Duncan in him from 15 feet and in, where he's always got his eyes on the basket on offense, and he knows how to use the rim and the backboard and the space around him.
And he keeps the ball high.
Yes, and he keeps the ball. He does all those things. He does all those things perfectly. The fact that he can step out and hit the 3 is what makes him a lot flashier than Tim Duncan. And obviously Tim Duncan had post moves that nobody else had, but I see a little bit of that in his mid-range game.
So by the way, I want to give you just a couple of stats on Matthew Hurt that I think are really interesting on this season. I mean, look, we've seen the 3-pointers. Dude's hitting almost 50% of his threes. And the past few games, he has basically been taking a three is taking a layup for Matthew Hurt, which is crazy. And a major reason why Duke is on a 3-game winning streak right now. But on the season, he's hitting more than 63% of his 2-point shots. And look, I know we were spoiled by Zion Williamson a couple of years ago, who hit 75% of his 2-point shots, but Matthew Hurt is not doing it by taking dunks and layups. He's doing it by shooting mid-range fadeaway jumpers. That's supposed to be a terrible shot, and he's hitting 63% of them. I mean,
and they're all going right to the bottom of the net.
It's crazy.
All water. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really impressive. And like I said, I think last game, he's playing his way into being an NBA first-round draft pick. I think, I'd love to have another year of Matthew Hurt the way he's playing now. I just don't know how he can come back.
So the one thing that I will note as a good from the bad, you were talking about the assists to made baskets ratio that we had, which was really good. Like half of the ones that weren't assists, where the ball moved around the perimeter, it was able to find Matthew Hurt in the post, and he took 2 dribbles and did a fadeaway and booyah, like just knocked it down. And because he took 2 dribbles, it didn't count as an assist, but clearly the offense was flowing in a way that allowed him to get into a position where he could sometimes use his creativity or use his dribble to kind of create some space. There was one where he kind of leaned into Sam Hauser and then faded away back. He didn't take a step when he did it and caused Sam Hauser to foul him as he made the basket. Just an incredible move that you only see few players do. But I think Matt Hurt is stepping up in a way that I haven't seen him do or anyone else on this team do. And he's doing it with a move that seems to be at this point close to unstoppable.
Okay, guys, that's the good. We had a lot of good, and it was a great game. But let's get to the bad just really quickly. Donald, I'll let you start. Tell me what you saw in this game that concerned you a little bit.
I will start with the inside game because I think we had a few of the bad come from that. And I say bad loosely because I don't think it was overly terrible, but they did have 34 points in the paint. Virginia did. And of course, last game we saw that our average of around 40 points allowed in the paint had dipped into the 20s. Now it's back into the 30s. Again, that is something where you had 2 guys in Sam Hauser and Jay Huff who were incredible on the night. They were able to basically do whatever they wanted inside the post. And Mark Williams and others really couldn't handle that. And that's okay because those are 2 all ACC caliber players. But I do think that is something that we need to focus on because I think when it comes to the defense, if teams thinking just bang around into the post, that leads to other concerns that we've had or this year, namely sending them to the free throw line and them getting a lot of free throw attempts where they get easy access to points. So we need to kind of limit that, bring that down. If we're in the 20s, I think that's a good thing because we are also in the 20s. If we're matching them in the paint or exceeding them in the paint, that means that we're going to be winning a lot more basketball games.
I'm surprised at how badly Duke lost the rebounding margin in this game. Not that UVA is not a talented rebounding team. We know that Huff and Hauser are leading the way for them. And we talked about how they're good at rebounding going into the preview. But the fact that Duke lost the turnover battle by 10 rebounds in a game that only featured 54 rebounds in total, like it's a huge discrepancy, 32 to 22. Because on a percentage basis, UVA had 50% more rebounds than Duke did, or just under that. And Duke was able to basically keep it close the whole game. That really is a testament to the rest of Duke's production and tells me that there's still a problem with Duke crashing the glass, especially on offense. And you could tell that there was a little bit of a game plan to that. But I think that part's concerning. And then Mark Williams' overall play, I think, he was maybe due for a down game here. He's played so well the last few weeks, and it's hard to keep that up. We've talked about how hard that is, especially for a freshman big. So the overwhelming big guys for UVA, I'm not concerned about that for Mark Williams going forward. Hopefully this is good tape that he can take and find ways to improve, but obviously not the strongest game from him.
Well, we talked about that in the preview too. We said that he was going to have trouble, especially against Jay Huff. And there's things that he will learn from this game, namely how a big man who is almost as big as him and has skills which we would call superior to him only based on experience. Jay Huff was able to put his hand in the passing lane so many times, and Mark Williams didn't have the strength to really box him out to create a lane or a passing lane or space for him to get the ball. That's something he's going to learn. And really in the offseason, again, this is one of those games where he didn't know he was a monster, so he didn't play like one. We've seen him play like a monster before. He's going to learn those things and take that and really improve as we go along.
I bet you're going to hear Mark Williams reference this game down the road when he has other successful moments at Duke, be they in the tournament or against other elite teams. He's going to say, I remember this game against UVA when Jay Huff, really showed me like the array of things that a big man could do in the ACC. And I think Mark Williams is going to learn a ton from this experience.
Yeah. So obviously I agree with you guys that the rebounds and some of the interior play was a bad, so to speak, was something, a vegetable, if you want to call it that we have to deal with. There are two other little things I wanted to mention. One was DJ Stewart, who really struggled on hitting 3-pointers, including several wide open threes, and didn't have a great game knocking down shots all day. Missed some key free throws, including, oh God, I mean the front end of the 1-and-1 that he missed in the final minute, where Duke sent him to Duke set up a play to get the ball to DJ Stewart so DJ Stewart would get fouled. Like we said, you are the man that's going to take these key free throws for us, and he missed it. So that's, that's a concern. And the other bad sort of relates to that, which is we were, as much as we were celebrating and enjoying this, half a second. I mean, Jay Huff, that shot that Kihei Clark misses at the end, Jay Huff grabbed it and put it in for a rebound slam dunk. I think it was half a second, maybe 3/4 of a second, but it is darn close to being about as heartbreaking a moment as you can possibly have. So as great as the game was, as excited as I am that Duke was able to pull out a tight game down the stretch, boy, we came within a absolute, just a hair's length of not winning that game. And it shows that we need to continue pressing and working and making sure we get better at the little things, because there were some mistakes that were made down the stretch.
I think when it comes to DJ Stewart, I think before the game they were talking about he shot 86% from the line this year, and he missed 3 free throws. He's going to make those next time. That's my confidence in him, is that he learns from this. He goes, hey, I know what that pressure feels like, right? He knows what the pressure feels like of going to the line to seal a game against a better opponent. He'll make those next time. He'll knock them down. And really from this, that'll be just like Mark Williams had some learning experiences that he can take from this game. DJ Stewart will also have some learning experience that he can take as well.
So this young team keeps on getting better, and it feels like every game is the most important game of the season at this point. So with the most important UVA game in the tail light, up next, we're going to be talking about the next most important game, which is our contest against Syracuse coming up on Monday. We'll have that after a quick break. All right, guys, it's a quick turnaround for the Blue Devils as we will be playing the Syracuse Orange on Monday evening, Big Monday on ESPN. And it is a huge, huge game for Duke because Syracuse is very much like Duke, battling right there on the bubble, trying to get into the NCAA tournament. This would be a major, important win for them. Is the kind of game that Duke probably, it's tough to lose any games at this point. When you're where we are, but a home game against a Syracuse team that is good but not great, we just got to find a way to win this. Donald, let me go to you first. Tell me where Syracuse stands. What have they been doing lately in their contests? Give me some of their results.
They're 13-6 on the year, and they're 7-5 in the conference, but they have won their last 3 games in a row over NC State, Boston College, and Notre Dame. They haven't been great this year, but they also don't have any real bad losses, in my opinion. Their 6 losses have come to Rutgers. They've lost twice to Pitt, UNC, UVA, and Clemson. So those are pretty decent teams. We're not necessarily worried about those. One thing that I have seen from some of the games that they've played, and we'll talk about some of how they relate to, Jason, to your advanced metrics, they allow a lot of 3-point attempts on defense, and their opponents usually make them. But in their losses, they also take and they miss a lot of threes. They average around 24% from 3-point land in their losses. Compare that with their last 3 games, again, against NC State, BC, and Notre Dame. They made 45% of their threes in those games. So our perimeter defense has to be strong. If we're going to let Buddy Boeheim get out there and make threes, this is going to be a long day for us. But if we can control them on the perimeter, again, cut down on the interior paint points that teams have been scoring against us seemingly at will for the last few weeks. If we can cut down on that, Syracuse is going to have a hard time controlling us. And again, I think the X factor that we have, Jamin Brakefield, Matthew Hurt, I don't think that Syracuse has a lot of guys that can really contest what they can bring to the table if they are on. So let's hope that they have a great shooting day and have a great day on defense, because if they do, Duke can take this game. And I will mention, we'll talk about this in a little bit, they are also listed, according to Joe Lunardi, as of this morning, Syracuse is listed right underneath us on the next 4 outline when it comes to bracketology. So this is a huge game, because we can tell the NCAA committee that, hey, you're talking about this team being level with us. They're not level with us.
I love it. I love it. So let me get to some of the advanced stats, the advanced metrics on Syracuse. They are number 51 in Ken Pomeroy. Duke, by the way, is number 30. And we're going to talk a little bit later about Duke's Ken Pom rank and their net rank and things like that. But Syracuse is number 51. They have the 31st best offense, the 74th best defense, so slightly better on offense than defense. When you play Syracuse, you always talk about that zone defense that they play. It forces you to play slow on offense. Syracuse is one of the, I guess you'd say, longest teams in the country in terms of the length of defensive possessions. Teams take a while to get a good shot, to get the shot they want against that Syracuse zone. But Syracuse plays really fast on offense. They're the 32nd fastest team in the country on offense. So you're going to go fast at one end of the floor, and they're going to try and make you play slow at the other end of the floor. Let's talk a little bit about that offense. They don't do a lot of things poorly, but they don't do a lot of things great either. They're good at not turning the ball over, about 43rd in the country at turnover percentage. They're a good passing team that gets good looks near the basket. They assist on 57% of their baskets. That's a really big number. So this is a team that's going to pass and find the best shot. And they are a great free throw shooting team. That shows you that they are good shooters. They hit 79.7% of their free throws, almost 80% of their free throws as a team. That's like otherworldly. That is one of the best numbers in the entire country. On defense, it's all about that zone. They beg you to shoot over it. They don't want you to drive into it. More than 45% of the shots taken against Syracuse are 3-pointers. That is one of the highest percentages in the country. And like Donald said, teams only hit about 31% of those threes. They want you to shoot a lot of threes, and you don't make a lot of threes against them. That is a good formula for being a good defensive team. They have really active hands on defense. Their steal rate, which is, a measurement of, percentage of possessions that end in a steal, almost 13%, 12.9% of possessions against Syracuse end in a steal. As unreal, 6th best in the country. And they are also a great defensive shot blocking team, the 12th best shot blocking team in the land. And by the way, it's not that they have 7-footers back there. The guys blocking their shots are Alan Griffin and Quincy Gurrier, who are just 6'5" and 6'7". I mean, these are not 6'9", 6'10", 7-footers blocking shots. These are guys who are long, and they know how to get in your way and block your shot. And it's a really important part of the Syracuse defense. The last thing I want to mention about them very quickly, this is a really interesting kind of stat about Syracuse. Only 16% of Syracuse's minutes go to bench players. They have 5 guys that they want to play as much as possible. Then they got one other player that they fit in there just a little bit. That one other player is a freshman, Kaderi Richmond. Now, I want to mention something about him. And Sam's about to talk about specific players that we need to look at. But I want to mention Richmond for this reason. This dude, who only plays about 18 to 20 minutes per game, is an absolute savant at steals. This is a really interesting stat. He has the highest steal percentage of any player in the country. I want to repeat that. There are 350 teams in Division I. Every one of those teams has, 10, 12, 13 players on it. This guy is the best player in the country at steal percentage. That is unreal. He only plays 20 minutes per game. He gets more than 2 steals per game. He had a game against Clemson. He had 6 steals in 25 minutes. Played Miami. He had 5 steals in 22 minutes. This guy, you have to be on the lookout for where he is on the floor. Again, he's just a freshman, doesn't play a lot, but by the time his career is done, you will know the name of Kadary Richmond. Sam, tell me about the other players that we need to look out for on Syracuse.
Glad you started us off with Richmond, because I think he's an intriguing player for Syracuse, and I want to make sure I highlight you did a great job of highlighting him. And as you said, the bench is short for Syracuse. He's basically the only guy off the bench that gets significant minutes for them. So I want to run through a few of the starters that are also important here. Some of these guys we've encountered before, and some we are going to be maybe less familiar with. I'll start with junior Buddy Boeheim, who, if nothing else, has a notable name, being a Syracuse basketball player whose name is Boeheim. He's one of a trio of guys that is scoring 15 points a game and is probably the most effective overall scorer for Syracuse. He's kind of the focal point of the offense. He's going to take a lot of shots, and he's a little bit turnover prone. So if you can get a situation where Buddy Boeheim is dribbling the ball around or is trying to pass out as opposed to finding his shot, that's an opportunity for Duke and for guys like Goldwire and Moore to be creating that little more havoc defense that has served Duke well the last couple games. I'm also going to come back to you, Jason, and say, come on, his name is Quincy Guerrier. He's from Montreal. We have to put the accent on him. So he's one of, as you mentioned, he's one of the not huge but big men. They've also got junior Illinois transfer Alan Griffin. Both of these guys are big wings who are going to disrupt shots. They are going to get rebounds. They're a decent rebounding group here at Syracuse, but Guerrier is a great rebounder. He pulls down almost 10 rebounds a game, and I think you're going to see some interesting matchups when Syracuse is on offense and Duke is on defense to see who's going to be guarding Quincy Guerrier between Mark Williams and Jamin Brakefield. I think that's going to be one of the keys to the game is Duke stopping that guy.
Really quickly, Alan Griffin, just note, the brother of incoming Duke freshman AJ Griffin. So
I had missed that in my research. So thank you for bringing.
Oh, really, Sam? You didn't know that?
Yeah. Oh, God.
I was going to say, when Alan Griffin was looking to transfer from Illinois, there was talk that Duke was one of the possible destinations for him because he could play with his brother, because AJ was already committed to Duke at that point. AJ committed very early, as you recall. AJ's a top 10 recruit. Folks, you're going to love him next year. Alan is somewhat similar player, but not quite as good as his younger brother. And Alan ended up going to Syracuse instead of Duke. But you can guarantee the Griffin family will be watching the game Monday night.
I am sure, therefore, we will be hearing a lot about this during the broadcast because
absolutely.
They love stuff like that. And then a couple guys that I think Duke fans will probably remember from previous years: Joe Girard, who's a sophomore point guard, and Marek Dolezaj, who's a senior big man, European guy. By
the way,
yes.
Joe Girard, another guy that there was talk he might go to Duke, but ended up going to Syracuse instead.
So, and Duke and Syracuse have certainly been in recruiting battles many times before. These are two programs that are run by a couple of coaches who are very good friends, and not that they have the same basketball philosophy, because Jim Boeheim's more of a zone defense guy and Coach K is more of a man-to-man guy, but they're going to be looking for, I think, similar types of players. So you'll certainly hear about that kind of intrigue. But Girard and Dolezaj are both also effective players for Syracuse. Those five plus Richmond are going to get the bulk of the minutes. So we're going to be seeing a lot of them in this game. If Duke can draw any fouls from Syracuse, hopefully, maybe you throw off the rotation a little bit. I think that overall, my take from, reading up about Syracuse a little bit more and watching a little bit here and there is that they're not quite as talented as Duke. And so if Duke's talent is finally rounding into form with guys like Brakefield turning into the versions of themselves that I think we would hope we would have seen maybe, even going into next year, that the way Duke is playing right now, they should be a couple possessions better than Syracuse over a 40-point game or of a 40-minute game. But this is still going to be an exciting game and a fun one. Syracuse is not on that same, I think, lower tier as some of the other teams that Duke has played in recent weeks. So they're closer to a good tournament lock than they are to a bad team that should be, considering a regime change the way that like Boston College just went through.
All right. So the last thing we got to talk about regarding Syracuse, and I think we we can't go away without mentioning this. Jim Boeheim sparked some major controversy in the world of college basketball this past week when he said that Duke's Jalen Johnson, that Duke was a much better team without Jalen Johnson, and that Jalen Johnson was hurting Duke. And a lot of people said, "Hey, Jimmy B, what are you doing talking about another team's players like that?" Especially after Coach K and the Duke team said they absolutely supported Jalen in Jalen's decision to go to the NBA and stop playing for Duke this year. I saw it suggested, I think it was on Twitter or someplace, that Jalen unretire, so to speak, come back to Duke for one game and hang a 40 spot on Syracuse and then say that he's all done. But you were talking about what the announcers will talk about in this Duke game, the Duke-Syracuse game. There's going to be controversy. There's going to be conversation, I should say, about Jim Boeheim and his comments about Jalen Johnson. And Boeheim, by the way, did try to walk it back a little bit over the weekend. He actually said he hasn't seen Jalen Johnson play at all this year. Like, he hasn't watched any Duke games yet because he's scouting their next opponent, and Duke hasn't been their next opponent until now. So he's like, look, when I said that they're better off without him, I haven't actually seen them play. I haven't seen him play at all. So he tried to walk it back a little bit, but at the same time, that is going to be sort of an undercurrent of this game. Anytime Jimmy B and Coach K are on the same floor together, there's crazy stuff that's going to happen.
I mean, all I have to say about that is, let's prove him right. He said we play better without him. Let's just prove him right. If we come out and we destroy him, then he can say that, hey, see, told you I know what I'm talking about. It's fine. I don't think it's necessarily controversial in the sense that I don't think Coach K is sitting there like, what does Jim Boeheim think about my team? I don't think we care about what Jim Boeheim thinks about the team, just like he doesn't care about what we have to say about Syracuse. So I say we just let it slide, we'll let it ride, and let's just prove him right. Let's be the better team on Monday night.
I am not going to tell you that I disagree strongly with Jim Boeheim. And in fact, I think he might actually be right. So the controversy here is just that he said the quiet part out loud. And that's fine. Look, Duke has had examples of this in the past where they've lost effective players and have figured out how to re-gel the team in a different way. This is not an unprecedented thing. And to Donald's point, fine, prove him right. Let's see Duke come out and beat Syracuse by 9 or 10 points, which I think would be a really nice outcome for them.
So playing Syracuse is a big deal because, as we mentioned earlier, like Duke, Syracuse is sitting there on the bubble, needing big wins against other bubble teams to get into the NCAA tournament. We find ourselves in the exact same shoes as the Orange. Donald, let me start with you. Let's do a little segment here before we go. Looking ahead, looking at where Duke is in terms of NCAA tournament chances. This is not something we talk about most years. Most years we're like, oh, are we a 2 seed or a 1 seed? This year it's like, are we a 9 seed or an 11 seed, or are we not even making the tournament? So get me started on this conversation.
Well, I think Joe Lunardi said at the beginning of yesterday, this was before Duke won, he had us on the next 4 outline. And then as the day progressed with other games that were going on, he moved us off that line. But he did mention that if we won out, that we should make the NCAA tournament. Now,
and he predicted we would win out.
And he predicted
I want to give Lunardi credit on College Game Day or whatever the show it was. I forget that he was on like at noon or so yesterday. They were talking to him and he said, I believe Duke will win all their remaining games and will comfortably make the tournament as a result.
Yeah. And I don't know what comfortable means in his mind, if that's like an 8 seed or a 9 seed or something. That feels comfortable. 10 or 11 seed means that we're on that bubble, and we're probably heatedly discussed if we win our remaining games and like even make the ACC finals, I think we're like a 7 or an 8 seed, because it'll be clear at that point that this is a different Duke team than what you saw earlier in the year. But sorry, I keep on interrupting you. Yeah, no, and I think that's good context, because I think that's where we're headed, right? If we talked a couple of weeks ago about what happens if we don't make the NCAA tournament, and I mentioned that one of the things that they look at the net, they look at KenPom, they look at all these other things, but they look at how a team has done over their last 10 games. And if that last 10 is 8-2, 9-1, 10-0, they look at that team and go, this team that we have right now is hot. The team that we're talking about from a month ago is not the team that we're seeing today. And this team can beat anybody in the country. That's what we need to kind of see. We need to show the NCAA selection committee that, hey, The team that you saw at the beginning of the season and in January is not the team that you were seeing right now towards the end of February and into March. And I think that as we keep going, we have good enough games against good enough opponents that if we beat them, that they can advance us up the ladder, so to speak, and they can get us into the NCAA tournament. We just need to keep playing the way we're playing and really grind it out, because some of these games are going to be, we get a couple revenge games. We get Louisville, we get UNC. Those games, we need to make sure that if we can beat them, we could then say, hey, that team that faced them last month, we're not that team. We clearly are much better. We beat them this time around on the road or at home or whatever it is. So I think when it comes to Duke, just keep progressing, keep improving, and keep grinding out these victories. Because if we do, even if they don't take us, we make it very hard for them to do so.
We got nothing but bubble and tournament teams left on our schedule, and that's not to say that there's an excuse for losing to any one of those teams, but your point about proving it. Duke's schedule gives us every opportunity to prove that we belong, because there are no games left against BC or Wake or even NC State. It is nothing but teams that are firmly on the bubble, or even teams like, I think, Carolina and Louisville, who are probably in already. Sam, what you got on this?
I think a couple weeks ago, at least I personally, and I'm trying to remember exactly the way you guys had characterized this, but I had mostly written off Duke's chances of making the NCAA tournament. It wasn't just that it's like, we know that there's a clear path because Duke has now won 3 games in a row, and we're talking about, the possibility of winning the rest of their games. It's not that they could not have won out and made the tournament. It's that the way the team was playing and the way that it seemed like it lacked cohesion and a clear way that they were going to win games. Not that, right, we know that Matthew Hurt was playing really well and was scoring a lot of points. We know that the freshmen were progressing a little bit and getting more comfortable in the ACC game, but there wasn't a clear formula for victory for Duke a few weeks ago. I think now the identity of the team has coalesced a little bit, and seeing Duke beat UVA, it's worth having this conversation again, so we can actually say, yes, it's possible for it's not just that it is possible for Duke to win the rest of their games, but that there's a way that we can imagine that happening, even as they're playing better teams, even as they're playing teams that, as Donald pointed out, Duke has already lost to this season. So I'm feeling excited about it, and I hope that doesn't get ruined quickly this week.
And the great thing about us, we mentioned the schedule that we have left. We have Syracuse, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and UNC left on our regular season schedule. We have a much better schedule than just about anybody else who was listed on that next 4 out or first 4 out or last 4 in line. St. Louis, and the next 4 out line with us is St. Louis, Utah State, and as we mentioned, Syracuse. First 4 out, Stanford, UConn, St. Bonaventure, and Richmond. Those teams, we have a much better schedule left. So if we can win our games out, we can show we're like, hey, our schedule down the stretch was tougher than these guys are, and we beat everybody in front of us. So that is, again, we focus on Syracuse for tomorrow night. We get past them, then we can worry about the rest of our schedule. But for now, keep focusing on one game at a time, because as these games build up, our resume builds up, and that's what we want to show the selection committee.
So really quick, I just want to mention one last thing related to all this. And you guys know I'm the advanced stat. I'm the Ken Pom dude on this podcast. A lot of people have talked about the fact that Duke's Ken Pom rating was 30 coming into the Virginia game, and coming out of the Virginia game, it was still 30. And they were like, wait, why didn't it move? And we've explained, look, Ken Pomeroy is not interested in wins and losses. He's interested in how efficient were you on offense? How efficient were you on defense? He expected the Duke-Virginia game to be a 1-point game with Virginia winning. Instead, it was a 1-point game with Duke winning. That kind of difference in final score doesn't really dictate a huge change in Ken Pom ranking. But the thing I want to point out about that is Duke has not been as good as their Ken Pom ranking would indicate all year. And by not be as good, I mean in terms of wins and losses. We have lost games that it felt like, based on our Ken Pom efficiency rankings, we should win. So frankly, at this point, if Duke continues to live up to our Ken Pom ranking, then we're going to be in really good shape. We have been a better team than we seem to be all year long. And what's happening now is the close games that we were losing, we've started to win. And that makes a big difference in your record, doesn't make a big difference in your Ken Pomeroy rankings. So I just want people to understand, don't be alarmed. It's not like, it's not like that win over Virginia wasn't important. It was hugely, hugely important, and it sets Duke on course. I think my bet is we got these 4 remaining games. If we go 3-1, and then we don't just do terrible in the ACC tournament, I think Duke's making the NCAA tournament. If we go 4-0, we're making the NCAA tournament regardless of what happens in the ACC tournament. If Duke goes 2-2 in these 4 games, we're going to have some work to do in the ACC tournament. We may even have to make the ACC finals, or perhaps even win the ACC. It's tough. So every game matters. At the most, we've got room for maybe 1 loss, but let's just win them all and make it easy. You guys like the sound of that?
Sounds good to me.
I'm down. Let's do it.
So before we go, guys, we got to get to player of the week. Are we even going to do this? I mean, is there any reason? I love the week that Jamin Brakefield had, and there are other guys who had really nice performances and the such. Matthew Hurt. I mean, I'll usually I ask you guys. I'm the host. I'm taking host prerogative. I'm going first. Matthew Hurt's the player of the week. He had 22 points on 13 shots against UVA, 22 points on 9 shots against Wake Forest. It feels like every 3-pointer he takes is going to go in. And I thought, by the way, a great defensive game, especially in the second half against Hauser of Virginia, who's one of the, first team all ACC kind of player. And Matthew Hurt doing it at both ends of the floor, the efficiency, no question in my mind. We should almost be asking who's the second place Duke player of the week. Donald, who you got for player of the week?
Matthew Hurt may not be just this player of the week. He may not be just the ACC player of the week. He might be the national player of the week. That's how good of a week he had. And I'm not going to go against that. So Matthew Hurt is my player of the week.
Sam, make it 3 for 3.
Nope, I won't.
What?
I wrote this.
Are you kidding me?
I took all the notes on this, and I know that Matthew Hurt really deserves it. But I think that the way we've seen Jamin Brakefield step into Jalen Johnson's role, not completely. He's not starting, but he's playing close to 20 minutes a game and just instantly looks like an effective player. And this week was maybe his best week of the season. I am going to tell you that my player of the week is Jamin Brakefield. I've given it to Matthew Hurt a few times this year. I am astounded at his offensive development. I love how well he's playing. And like Jason, I'm also feeling confident that he's on his way to leaving for the NBA draft and having, something of a decent NBA career based on this offensive production. But I'm so hyped for Jamin Brakefield, and go back and watch the top 5 video that Duke Blue Planet put out and just get excited all over again for the impact that Jamin Brakefield is making at both ends of the floor. He's fired up. He's getting his teammates excited. He's scoring points. He's blocking shots. He's getting steals. He's doing everything for Duke right now. He's not scoring the most points. He's not the most efficient, but damn if he isn't one of the most fun players on Duke right now.
I'm going to admit, until about 5 minutes before we recorded, I had Jamin Brakefield down as my player of the week. What happened was I kept looking back at, I just looked back at the week, and I also looked at some of the other notable performances from around the country this week. And when I realized that Matthew Hurt could be put up against every single one of them, I was like, I'm not doing what Jason did a few weeks ago. I'm gonna go ahead and just give it to our boy, Jamin Brakefield. You're the man.
I'm gonna be hard like that.
I'm
gonna hold. I've gotten to this point with Matt Hurt that I'm holding him just to this completely lofty standard.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Like Jason said, he's averaging 22 points a game on 11 shots. Like, that's ridiculous.
That's some JJ Redick type of numbers, by the way.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, Sam, look, I respect the choice. And Jamin Brakefield had a great week and has shown himself to have a great future in a Blue Devil uniform. But man, Matthew, come on, dude. I mean, Matthew Hurt, he was hitting 3-pointers like they're layups. It's and the amazing thing is, he doesn't even touch rim. Most of those shots, they're going through the net. The net barely moves. That's how smooth those shots are going through. I swear the basket must look like the size of a swimming pool to him sometimes. But I get it. I get it, Sam.
We're tough.
There's no rules here. We're not being held to any kind of standard, but I thought Jamin Brakefield deserved this recognition. So here it is. We have long said
that the DBR podcast player of the week standard is a very, very difficult one, and not everyone gets it. It's something that it should be coveted. I don't know if we have to come up with an award or some little piece of paper that we can hand to them, but it's something that they should be coveting because we have high standards here at the DBR podcast.
I love it. All right, folks. So that's going to wrap it up here for episode 285 of the DBR podcast. Thank you, Donald and Sam, for joining me. We will be back with you right after the Monday game against Syracuse. Come on, Blue Devils. Let's go for a 4-game winning streak. Let's go, Duke. Here's the Duke band. Take us home.